Okay, so hi everyone. Good to see everyone here today. So welcome to Research Insider 3. I'll be your host and my name is Ina Sofia. Now, I'd like to introduce to you our speaker for today, Dr. Nusaibah Abdul Rahim. Dr. Nusaibah completed her bachelor's degree in pharmacy at Monash University, Australia. Then in 2017, she completed her PhD in microbiology at Monash University, Australia. Dr. Nusaibah is a very reputable researcher with having more than 200 citations for the 20 research papers that she has written together with other researchers. And currently she is working as the senior lecturer and also head of department at the Faculty of Pharmacy, Universiti Malaya, UM. Not just that, she is also the director of the Malaya Translational and Clinical Pharmacometrics Group at Universiti Malaya. She is active in International Society of Antimicrobial Chemotherapy, Early Career Working Group, with her role as the secretary in the organization. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our inspirational and brilliant speaker, Dr. Nusaibah, to share her knowledge and insights with us. The floor is all yours now.
Thank you so much, Inas, for that kind introduction. So I'll just share my screen now. Okay, so the screens are up. Yeah, so thanks again so much, MBIOS, for having me. Really happy to be here to share a little bit about pharmacy and research in pharmacy. So today's session, this is the outline for today's session. So I thought I'd start off with talking a little bit about my pharmacy journey, career prospects in pharmacy, what sort of research is done in pharmacy, and applying for a PhD in pharmacy and microbiology. So before I continue, I'd just like to say that, of course, the opinions here expressed are of my own, and they don't reflect the faculties or the universities. Okay, so before I start, I thought I just touch a little bit on pharmacy itself. So what is pharmacy all about? So basically just some definitions from Wikipedia. But I think we all know that pharmacy is all about medications, about drugs. So actually it is, that's true. It's in fact the science and practice. So we have from the science all the way to practice and clinical. So it's about, whether you're discovering a drug, whether you're focusing on the formulation, whether you're preparing or dispensing. And at the end of the day, the aim is so that by the time it reaches the patient, it is safe and effective. So after a 4-year degree, after a 4-year course doing pharmacy, you actually get a pharmacy degree. So just to let you guys know, after 4 years, you don't immediately become a pharmacist. So after the 4 years, you get a pharmacy degree, and then followed by you have to do a 1-year internship. So this can be done in community pharmacy, in hospital pharmacy, in industry, and then only then, once you qualify, you become a fully registered pharmacist. So I thought I'd just share a little bit on pharmacy before we start. So pharmacists are healthcare professionals, and they are the drug experts, and we focus on optimizing health outcomes of our patients. Okay, so now moving on to my pharmacy journey. So as Inas mentioned, I am a senior lecturer now at Universiti Malaya. So now I'm an academic, but I wasn't always an academic. So how did I get here? So in high school, actually, my two favorite subjects were chemistry and economics. So it kind of made sense to do pharmacy, liking those two subjects. And I was actually already based in Melbourne at that time. So that's why I decided to go to Monash University, which is in Melbourne. So I started my Bachelor of Pharmacy in 2005 and I finished in 2008. And just to share with you guys what is actually covered in the pharmacy program during the 4 years. So pharmacy, these are the disciplines of pharmacy. So basically, as mentioned, it's about the science all the way to practice and clinical. So there is a lot of science in it. So there's pharmaceutical chemistry, there's a lot of pharmaceutical technology when we touch about the formulation. There's a lot on pharmaceutical life sciences. So if you're more interested in pharmacology, looking at receptors, looking at mechanism of action, that's covered under pharmacy. And then, of course, we have the social pharmacy, pharmacy practice, and clinical pharmacy. So you can see in terms of the research later on, you'll see that, it's quite a vast area because it covers all the sciences leading up to the health sciences as well as the clinical aspects of it. So I also would like to just highlight, so pharmacists, once you become a pharmacist, where do you usually work? What are the career paths like? So being a pharmacist, you actually have a few options. You might see community pharmacists. So they're the ones that you see in, say, Watson's, in Guardian, in Caring, and all of that. Hospital pharmacists. So we have hospital pharmacists, be in private or public. And within hospital, there's actually a whole bunch of different roles as well as hospital pharmacists. And the other big one is industry, actually. So we know, pharmaceutical companies. So for example, like Merck, like Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and all of that. So these are kind of the three main things that we look at when we think about pharmacists. So community, hospital, industry. So actually, when I was at uni, I wasn't really exposed to research itself. That didn't actually come to mind because we didn't have final year projects as well. So our attachments were very much focused on community and hospital. So before I joined pharmacy, the course, I actually always thought that I wanted to become a community pharmacist. So I'm glad that, during uni, we have all of these attachments because it pretty much gives you exposure to like different parts and different sectors of pharmacy. So because during your 4 years, you'll be like, okay, so what pharmacist do I want to be? Like, where do I want to go? So actually in my third year, when doing hospital attachments, that's when I really found out that, oh, wow, I want to become a hospital pharmacist. So starting off with thinking that I wanted to become a community pharmacist, during uni, it totally changed. I wanted to become a hospital pharmacist after doing the attachments. So I was very happy that I knew what I wanted to become. I wanted to become a hospital pharmacist. But nonetheless, with my pharmacy journey, it actually started with community pharmacy because Australia is very focused on community pharmacy. So I thought I still needed to keep my options open as well. So I did get a part-time job as a pharmacy assistant in community pharmacy. So that was my first ever pharmacy related job. So this was in 2008 to 2009. So in my fourth year and my internship year. So the students there, many would have already had or already started a part-time job since second year. So everyone would already have a part-time job in community pharmacy. And that actually really helps with, understanding and linking up theory and, what you see in practice. So I still started my journey with community, but still was hoping that I would get a job in hospital. So fortunately enough, I did manage to get a position as an internship at St. Vincent's Hospital in Melbourne. So I actually did my 1 year internship. So we call it PRP, Provisional Registered Pharmacist in St. Vincent's Hospital. And then after that, I got registered as a fully registered pharmacist in Australia. And then what happened was in 2010, I decided to come back to Malaysia. And again, I was fortunate to be able to continue working in a hospital. So I was very happy, working in hospital again as a ward pharmacist. And actually it was here because I was one of the ICU pharmacists. So it was actually here during this time that I got to know about this group of antibiotics called polymyxins. So during uni, I didn't remember us, covering this antibiotic. And it's in fact because it's actually a last line antibiotic used, against multi-drug resistant pathogens. So usually you do only see it in critically ill patients. So at that time, I remember that's when I knew that, oh, this is what I want to pursue my PhD in. This is what I want to do my PhD in. I wanted to do my PhD on antibiotics, specifically polymyxins. So I was digging up, different universities, looking at Monash, and Monash happened to have a lab group, a research group that was, a world leading research group on polymyxins. So just to share with you guys, so the PhD project that I worked on, the thesis is called Targeting NBM, which stands for New Delhi Metallobeta-lactamase, producing Klebsiella pneumoniae, optimizing novel combinations with polymyxins. So it was about combating AMR. It was about combating antimicrobial resistance, because as we all know, it is a global health threat. And if you look at the reviews that come out, and they expect that in 2050, there would be 10 million deaths caused by AMR. So really, we need to save this last line therapy antibiotic. And one way to do that was actually optimizing it by using combinations with it. So that was what my PhD was on. And my supervisors, Professor Jian Li, Associate Professor Dr. Tony Velkov, and Dr. Philip Bergen. So they really helped shape me who I am today in terms of a researcher. So I decided, like I said, to actually do it at Monash University because I actually had a very great time during my undergrad. I really loved Monash Uni back then. So I decided that I wanted to do it in Monash. And like I said, it kind of aligned with my area of research interest. So initially, the department that I was enrolled in officially is D4, so drug delivery, disposition and dynamics. So this was at the same campus in Parkville. So Monash Uni, just to let you all know, there's a few campuses in Victoria. And then what ended up happening was that in 2016, my supervisor and the whole lab pretty much, relocated to another faculty. So then we went from D4 department with MIPS, we went to microbiology department with BDI. So it was, we went to move to another campus pretty much. So that's why I guess my PhD is kind of, in pharmacy and microbiology because I was officially enrolled in like two different departments. So that's what happened there. So yeah, I thought I'd just like to highlight again with PhD, of course, it is very challenging, but you have good moments as well. And for me personally, what I'd like to highlight is when, well, this was a highlight for me when I got this young investigator travel grant. So this was very exciting. So it meant that I could present my work in a conference, in an international conference in San Diego. So they basically covered the flight tickets, accommodation, and the registration fees and all of that. So this was really exciting. So I think if there are any PhD students watching, I'd like to just say that if there are, watch out for these travel grants, watch out for these opportunities for young investigators. They're usually out there, for conferences as well. So do be sure to apply for them because, you never know, you'll get the opportunity to, travel and present your work. Yeah, so after that, in 2017, early 2017, while I was while I was finishing up my thesis, I decided to move back to Malaysia. So then I moved back to Malaysia. And during this time, I thought I wanted to explore what it's like to be a lecturer. I kind of was interested in, in teaching. So of course, PhD is all about research, and sometimes you do a bit of teaching in terms of tutorials and all of that. But I really wanted to get into the education side of things. So when I came to Malaysia and after I submitted my thesis, I applied and joined at Taylor's University, so School of Pharmacy at Taylor's University. And it really did teach me a lot in terms of, becoming, because when I came back to Malaysia, I had to become an independent researcher. And then it really helped to teach me how to become a lecturer in terms of being an educator in that sense. So it was a really great experience at Taylor's. And then in December 2019, I decided to make the move to Universiti Malaya. So now I am with the Department of Clinical Pharmacy and Pharmacy Practice at the Faculty of Pharmacy in Universiti Malaya. So I guess that basically sums up my pharmacy journey. So, a little bit of community, and then went to hospital, and now I'm an academic and doing research. So let's get into the research now. Okay, so because that's what I mainly do now. So research in the field of pharmacy. So what can be done in pharmacy? So I think again, like I highlighted this slide before, you can imagine like it can pretty much be anything here. So if you have a chemistry background, if you're into formulations, if you're into nanotech and all of that, if you're into anything to do with pharmacology studies, so basically the research in pharmacy is really vast. And then what I'd like to highlight is that, for example, with our postgraduate students, even when we look for postgraduate students, or when postgraduate students apply, you don't necessarily have to have a pharmacy degree. So I thought I'd just make that clear. So if you were to do a master's in pharmacy, or if you were to do a master's or a PhD in pharmacy, there are many projects where you don't need to have a pharmacy degree. So we do have many students that did have, any science related degree that work with us. But just to highlight, of course, there are certain elements of pharmacy when it gets more to the clinical side. That's when, we most likely a requirement would be having a pharmacy degree. But yeah, there's a lot of research in pharmacy here. Yeah. So again, going back to my PhD project, where did mine fit in? I guess it was still a lot. So just sharing the methodology to be a bit more clear in terms of what I did. So a lot of, the microbiology experiments. So all of the, the broth microdilution, the checkerboards. But what was interesting with the work we did at Professor Jian Li's lab is that we incorporated a lot of pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. So basically, pharmacokinetics is what the body does to the drug, and pharmacodynamics is what the drug does to the body. So when we talk about doing all of these microbiology experiments, or any experiments, we should be thinking about clinically relevant concentrations. So at the end of the day, when we select certain concentrations, does that reflect the concentrations that you'll find in patients or that you'll find in humans, pretty much? So it takes that into account. And another thing is that when we do these experiments, sometimes it's all using static concentrations. But again, what we did with these PKPD models was that we actually simulated the concentrations that we would again find in patients, because these concentrations would actually fluctuate. So we would simulate that in the models so that they would be more translational. And then I also did, in vivo studies and touched on systems biology. So this is when I was exposed to, omics, did transcriptomics, did metabolomics. And then what we did was, so basically once we found a combination that was synergistic against NDM, Klebsiella pneumoniae, we wanted to understand the mechanism of synergy. So we did a lot of omics work to look at the pathways that were significantly perturbed following the combination treatment. So with that, what we did was that we combined and we merged and we integrated all of these multi-omics and did the analysis. So we did make use of a GSMN, so genome scale metabolic networks as well, in order to then identify the pathways. So that's just highlighting a little bit of the methodology in terms of what I did for my PhD. So when I came back, usually, like I said, you're an independent researcher. What do you do when you come back? Or where do you start? So usually people do start pulling on what they learned from their PhD, right? What skills did you get? What area was your PhD in? So I did really stick with what I did. So for example, polymyxins, my research is still on antimicrobial PKPD, omics and genome scale metabolic modeling. But since then, I've also, explored different things as well. And I do have an interest in pharmacometrics and digital health now. So pharmacometrics, just to share with you, this is more about quantifying a lot of relationships in terms of drug exposures and looking at why certain populations respond differently, to certain drug concentrations. So a lot of modeling is involved, and it's basically used to optimize dose as well. Okay, so there's a lot of different applications, but one of them is to optimize dose and to individualize dose. So that's what pharmacometrics is all about. And I've also now ventured into digital health because, as you all know, now we see a lot of telemedicine, telehealth, telepharmacy. So I've also touched on digital health now in terms of one of my research interests. So just to share with you guys some of the projects that I'm working on now as a principal investigator. So one of the things about research is that for many of the projects, you do need funding, especially if you're doing lab work, right? So if you're doing lab work, of course, you need funding. So that's when, as an academic, as a researcher, one of the things that you do is that you end up writing up a lot of grant proposals, right? And then you submit and hopefully it gets funded, so then you can start your project. So I'd just like to share. So again, there are funding from, there's internal funding, meaning to say it comes from universities. there are funding that comes, that you apply a national funding or international or even industry. So don't, you can also reach out to industry as well in terms of the grants. So I think for me personally, I was very excited when I first got my first grant. So that was in 2018. So I joined Taylor's in 2017 and then got my first grant in 2018. So that's when I really learned, how everything works. And then I think because in Monash, actually the lab that I was in was a very well funded lab. So it was good to start fresh, because then you see, what goes on in terms of having to purchase, and how to set up all of the experiments. So it was a really good, learning experience for me when I got the first grant. And then after that, it kind of builds. The other thing for me, I think was challenging was that, like I said, when I came back, um, you need to form new connections and networks, because I had zero networking in Malaysia. So everyone was in Melbourne. So, but you can still, of course, collaborate internationally as well. So I think it was all about finding the right research team and then finding the right members, and then teamwork does really play a huge role in research. So yeah, it's all about working together. It's all about collaborative work. It's all about multidisciplinary work as well. So as mentioned, so I thought I'd just highlight. So some of the funding did come from universities. Some of them did come from, the Malaysian MOE, national bodies. And then with the digital health, we are working with industry on these projects. So I think, I just again like to highlight how important it is, because all of this is a team effort. It's, with the research, is all a team effort. So in terms of the research team that I'm part of, there are microbiologists, there are bioinformaticians, there are data scientists, there are pharmacometricians, there are clinicians. So again, not just pharmacists, right? So we're all working together, and focusing on the same objective. So yeah, it's been really great, getting to know researchers and working together and all of that. And even our PGs and RAs come from different backgrounds as well. So applying for a PhD. So here's just, I guess, a list that I personally came up with of things that you would want to consider if you're applying for a PhD. And I think it might not be, it's not limited to pharmacy or microbiology. It's more like in general, like if you were to do a PhD, what would you consider? So for me, purpose is really important. You really have to ask yourself, why do you want to do it? Why are you doing it? Because, as you all know, it is like a 3 to 4 year. It's a huge commitment. You have to ask yourself, why do you want to do a PhD? Another thing, a lot of people don't know whether to go with the area or whether to go with the skills. So, think about it. Do you want to focus on certain skills and techniques that you want to pick up? Or is it about a certain condition, a certain disease, or a certain, area that you like? Like for me personally, at that time, because I wasn't exposed to research or the skills, so it was more of an area, like I really wanted to, focus on antibiotics. So mine was area focus. But now in hindsight, like I said, if you really think about the purpose, then you might also consider what are the skills that you actually want to pick up. So country as well, like where do you want to do it? University is super important as well. And supervisors. So if you choose a supervisor, make sure you are able to work with that supervisor, because again, you're going to be with that supervisor for like 3 to 4 years. So I remember when I started talking to my supervisor, it was a long process. Like I think I started talking to my supervisor maybe a year before I actually officially enrolled. So it's not something you talk about 1 week or a month and then you start, right? You actually really have to talk, you have to talk things through. But for me personally, it did take a while. So that's why in 2013, I did actually resign and then went off to do my PhD. But yeah, supervisor is super important. And it's worth, I know, asking other students that did a PhD with those supervisors. I know, so that's how sometimes you really need to know. So it's worth looking into their profiles and asking around as well. So the lab that you join, is it a small lab? Is it a big lab? Is it well funded? Though, those are the things to consider as well. And lastly, scholarship opportunities, so always check, what are the scholarship opportunities available at that institute, at that university. So I guess that's all I have for today. So again, thank you so much for having me.